you don't know it's broken until you measure it. And that's one of the things that people get tripped up on, is they don't think about measuring their non-manufacturing processes.
Today, I'm excited to welcome Matt Townsend to the show. Now, I've known Matt for many years, and he's a fantastic continuous improvement practitioner. Matt owns and operates a consulting company called Spark Engineers. And today, we had a really cool chat about the issue of automating bad or broken processes. And this is a very, I would say, serious issue. And it's, as we talk about quite a bit, it's definitely not just for manufacturing. I mean, this is happening. I even make the argument early in the episode that it's even a bigger issue outside of manufacturing, because if you think about the whole wide world, of all the things that are happening in the world, manufacturing is a pretty small subset of all the activities that happen in the world. And bad processes are everywhere, and automation is everywhere. And when those things marry up, it can be problematic. So we have a good chat about that. And then we talk a lot about, how do we go about identifying bad processes, and how do we then go about improving them? So really good stuff. I think you're going to enjoy this one. I know I did. Show notes can be found over at gembapodcast.com. Look for episode 528. And also be sure to scroll down and go check out Spark Engineers, and follow Matt on LinkedIn and all that kind of good stuff. All right, enough from me. Let's get to the show. Matt, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well, Ron. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Hey, so where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from Winona Lake, Indiana.
Mm-hmm. And temperature today?
Temperature is a balmy 44 degrees.
That's not too bad. It's t-shirt weather up there, man.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Anything over 35 is t-shirt weather.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in Ohio, so man, I'm all about the weather, man. And I'm actually going back up to see my mom here, and I live in Texas now, and to see her, and I grew up there, but man, I've been here so long that my blood is thin. And my daughter actually attends Franciscan University up in Steubenville, Ohio. So it's basically right on the Pittsburgh border there. Mm-hmm. And poor girl, I mean, she was cold in Texas when it was 80. So,
that's a culture shock.
Man, she loves the school, but the winter is hard, man, for her. Yeah. Anyhow, all right. Well, hey, man, I'm excited for today's episode. It's going to be a cool topic. But as you know, Matt, we like to get things going with our guest sharing a quote. So what do you got?
Yeah. So my quote is from Dr. Deming in the New Economics. It's if you change the rule for counting people, you come up with a new number.
What's that mean to you?
To me, that means that understanding what the data actually means can be misleading when looking at the data. So you need to understand the information behind it in order to interpret what the results mean. Yeah.
Taking data out of context, right, is very dangerous.
Very, very dangerous.
Yeah. Thus the invention of the control chart.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Very good. All right. Well, hey, man, tell us a little bit about your background, Matt. Tell us about how you got involved in all this continuous improvement stuff, and then tell us about Spark Engineers.
Yeah. So my background is what I like to call eclectic. Okay. So I have a bachelor's degree in exercise science with a minor in biology. So I was very science focused, went on and got a master's degree in business administration, focusing on operations management, and then got another master's degree, in engineering technology. And also growing up, my dad, he was in operations growing up. So, it always instilled a lot of things and how to look at processes and how to improve things. It's been a big part of my life for a long time. But through the years, I've worked for large Fortune 500 companies that had these huge groups of people that were focused on Lean and Six Sigma. And so that's how I got started. So I got my green belt when I was at United Health Group, my black belt when I was at Lippert Components, and my master black belt when I was at Avalon Technologies. So, I've spent a lot of time in orthopedic OEMs, which is what's up in this area. And then a lot of time in contract manufacturing as well, helping to support OEMs. So that's been my path, but the continuous improvement has been a part of my life most of my adulthood, and it's been a lot of fun to get into it, and then continuing to learn. No matter what the situation is, if you get your master black belt, you're still learning. If you get if you get a master's degree, you're still learning. If you, PhDs don't even know it all. So, there's always more information to learn. Yeah. And it comes back to I was just talking with my kids this weekend about PDCA, and we were chatting about ways that they can look at their life and plan for the future and try new things and not be afraid to fail. So most of it's just lessons for life.
Yeah, 100%. Curious, what brought you into the medical science side of things early on in your education?
For me, it was just looking at the way that the world was going. You had the aging baby boomers, I've always been data driven. So looking at the aging baby boomers, you look at, okay, well, what sort of path is this going to take? What sort of trends are we going to see in the world? And that's been a big part of it. So, even looking in the current state of the world, is medical device the best place for me to be now? Probably not. So that's why I got into Spark Engineers. I started that. And so we are an engineering consulting firm focusing on providing automation and technology, operational health assessments to a variety of customers across the globe. So we're doing a lot outside of medical device, which is fantastic, because that's, we're starting to see ripples go through the med device industry right now where they're just now feeling the effects of COVID. We're starting to see some of those things happen, and with the state of the world, it's like, okay, well, do we spend more time in aerospace and defense? Do we spend more time in outside of manufacturing? So that's the current state of things, is looking at that. What's the next big trend? Got
it. All right. Well, hey man, let's jump into the topic of the day, and just at a high level, from a theme perspective, we're going to talk about why we shouldn't automate broken processes. And, obviously this is very applicable in the manufacturing world, but I would argue it might even be more applicable outside of the manufacturing world. Because if you think about it, in the whole grand scheme of the world and the things that happen in the world, manufacturing is a tiny piece of it, right? You think about all the other things that are going on. So even if you're not in manufacturing, listen, because this is applicable to you. So, but let's start with, like, maybe at the beginning, like what would you say is a broken process? Like, how do we define that?
Yeah. So I think that what trips people up a lot is the thought that their process isn't broken to begin with. And in order to understand whether or not you have a broken process, you need to do process mapping. You need to understand what your customers are needing. And that can be internal customers, that can be external customers, when they're needing it by, and even with information as well. It's finding that you don't know it's broken until you measure it. And that's one of the things that that people get tripped up on is they don't think about measuring their non-manufacturing processes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So give an example though, like of
sure.
Because obviously you could have a process that's not optimal,
right?
Because all processes can be improved and should be improved, right?
Yes.
And so, but is there a point at which you say, "Hey, this is broken"?
Yeah. So, as an example, looking at a process in it was in HR, so it was an HR process, human resources, and the company that I was working with couldn't understand why their onboarding costs were so high. So what we did was we looked at the process. So got the HR group in a room, put butcher block paper on the walls, handed everybody Sharpies and Post-it notes, and we just started to map out the process of its current state. Mm-hmm. Come to find out that they were doing background checks after people were hired. So after they had started, because the way that they were going through it is they were so quick to try and get people in and on the floor and starting to work that they determined that the background check wasn't a critical path for their process. And so when they came through it, and this was in a more impoverished area, there was more crime in the area. It was a larger city. It was a suburb, not a suburb of a larger city, but an area of a city that had a little bit higher crime rate. Mm-hmm. And so the folks that they were getting in had these the felony charges that they didn't find out about until after the fact. I mean, they even hired somebody in that was just recently arrested for murder, or let out on murder, or I forget what it was, but there was some sort of murder involved. And so they actually had to walk him out the day after he started. So they paid for all of the drug tests, they paid for all of the day one training, the onboarding information, all of that. So they then change their process to move that up and say, okay, well, this is actually a part of our critical path. So that was a broken process. Mm-hmm. I've also done work for a few organizations in their accounting departments as well, where we looked at their month-end close. Mm-hmm. And with their processes, they were taking 5 to 7 days to close their books every month. Mm-hmm. And when they were looking to become a publicly traded company, that was not going to fly. Mm-hmm. So we looked at building some databases and things of that nature to help improve the flow of their information. But what we found out was that their processes within their month-end close, it took 3 times too long, just because they were waiting on one piece of information from one group of people. Mm. And so we knew that automating that process was not going to make it go any faster. They were still going to have to wait until they got that information. So then it's tracking down the information in the source and working with that group to get things
right.
Yeah.
Now, and from a manufacturing perspective, what are some of the classic examples of broken processes that you've seen people attempt to automate?
Yeah. So you have these areas that have high scrap rate, right? Mm-hmm. So let's say you're making a high tolerance or tightly toleranced product, and your scrap rate is 5%. Now, some people might think, 5% is not that bad, but if you're working in medical device, you're shooting for under 1. Mm-hmm. And with that, with the tightly tolerance process, if you start to automate some of those things, you'll see, unless you have automated checks in that system and that information being looped back in a closed loop system to the machine to make the offset, you'll see things start to drift just because of tool wear. Your speeds and feeds are different. You'll start to see cosmetic defects. You'll start to see a lot of issues. And so they're always chasing that improvement. So you can watch a ton of videos online where based off of the type of insert they have on their tool, can make a difference in the chatter that's made on their machine. So you can change a few things here and there that help to improve that process to where you can automate it and have less issues and leave it unattended. Right. But it's always important to do that mapping before you start digging into automation.
Yeah. Right. Well, and another area that I've seen a lot of is just not necessarily well, I guess it would be defined as a bad process, but just the whole concept of automating waste.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like if we're like big conveyor systems, that's waste, like put everything closer together so you don't have to convey things across your facility, right? Because the customer's not paying for that thing to be traveling on a conveyor route. But I've seen so many people that's so proud of their conveying system. And I get it, in Amazon or something like that, they need conveying systems, right? But, make sure that you've got things as optimized and a point of use and, there's, before you start automating all that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah. I worked with a distribution company to help automate some of their processes, and that was their big thing was, we need conveyor systems. We need, this and that to try and make it easier. And what they ended up doing was looking at their highest running products, forming those in a U shape, right? So that way their value added time spent picking that product was still there. They removed the non-value added by making it a U shape. So the time that they were finished picking to the time they started picking again was much shorter.
Right.
So it wasn't a straight line. So then we had to reconfigure the warehouse and make things faster. But that way, then anything else that was higher running would then come back to that U shape, and then so that was a fun project, but yeah, I mean it's everywhere, and you don't want to automate waste, you want to take that those steps out of the process as much as possible.
No, for sure. So I mean you've touched on this a little bit already, but can you maybe give some more ideas of the issues that surface when we are automating waste, and is it just like you're making bad stuff faster, or
you're making bad stuff faster, you're adding labor into the process. So non-value added labor is being added into the process. So if you look at it from a cost per piece view, right, it's you are adding more non-value added time to that process because of what you're doing, than what it should be. I mean, the goal in a lot of these manufacturing settings is either to reduce the cost of the product being made so you can improve your margin, or give cost concessions to the customer if you're needed to, or help to reduce a lot of those costs. But what can happen is that you're adding cost in the back end because you're having to hire, 10 more people in your quality department to catch bad product before it goes out the door.
Or you're spending millions of dollars on inspection equipment.
Right. Yeah. And it's quality is not the problem. It's the cost of poor quality. Your cost of poor quality goes up. So, that's the thing that people need to keep in mind when they're automating is you need to get in someone, whether it's internally with your engineering department. If you're smaller and you don't have that, you hire a consultant to come in and look at the process, and focus on, word to the wise here, focus on consultants that are looking to improve your processes and give you value as fast as possible, rather than, milking that cow dry.
So, okay, well, let's transit. That's my next kind of topic or question is, all right, we get it. Don't automate waste. Don't automate bad processes. So what are some practical tips or some things that you've seen work for folks who was like, all right, well, how do I identify and how do I improve bad broken, wasteful processes?
Yeah. So the identification is the key there. So looking at the process from a perspective of you need to do your SIPOC, look at your suppliers, your inputs, the process, the outputs, and the customers. Look at that gives you the overall view of your process. And this works for manufacturing, it works for distribution, it works for the back end processes, it works for health insurance companies, everybody. If you look at it that way, right, that breaks it down into 5 buckets, and then you can look at the process map within that, and that can be a business process map. You can look at your value stream mapping. You can look at all sorts of different process maps. You can do fishbone, turtle diagrams, all the wonderful tools that I've been able to experience on Gemba Academy, which has been fantastic, but that's a topic of conversation for another time, right? But you can look at all these things and start to map out the improvements. So, you can do it in a Kaizen event, you can do it over time, but you need to have the people that are involved with the process doing the work in order to understand the ins and outs of the process and understand the different paths that a process can go down. I've been lucky enough to be around a lot of people that are implementing systems, a variety of systems, whether it's a machine monitoring solution or an ERP, an MES, Salesforce instances, all these things. And that's the number one thing that I tell them all is you need to map out the process of the way that it is, understand what you want it to do, map out the way you want it to be, and then determine the delta between the two.
Yeah. So talk maybe a little bit more on just specific mapping techniques that you've seen work in maybe a front office environment. Are you throwing down traditional value stream maps? Is it more of a detailed process map, or what have you seen work well?
So I've used both value stream maps and detailed process map, and for a lot of the areas in the front end, right, or even the back end, it's that detailed process map for a lot of those that I have found that provide the biggest bang for the buck, and understanding those processes, even in a standing up a PMO. Project management office. It was the detailed process map to help make it as lean as possible, with being able to achieve fantastic results. So it's that the SIPOC, the detailed process map, and really trying to streamline the operations.
I like swim lane. I like marrying like a swim lane detailed process map together. Just to see all the handoffs of all the various people. Like, why does it got to keep going back to such and such 42 times? Right.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And then sometimes it can be an infinite loop. You know, if that information's not there. I've even seen it where a process can be. They tried to automate a broken process at one company I worked with, and their order intake would come from their fax number and automatically go into an email bucket. But if it had any Chinese characters in it, it threw it into a black hole. It never made it into their email inbox for the incoming orders. So they had hundreds and hundreds of orders that came in that were never serviced because it was automated to a fault where it just went into a black hole. So that brings me to my next point, that even after you do these process maps and understand the process, you need to test out the solution before you go live with it. My brother-in-law and my wife, they're work in the tech space, and they're like, oh, when people test things in production, it's always going to be a recipe for disaster. So always test things out in a sandbox or side environment to where you can see if the solution's going to work. But the business process maps, the detailed process maps, using swim lanes. And there are a lot of products out there that are extremely helpful in business process mapping, like Miro. You've got Visio. There are some others out there as well, but those are some fantastic products to really map out processes, and they're simple to use. They've got tons of information on there about how to use the product, the different types of operations within the product itself, within your process. Understanding whether or not something's paper documented or in a database. I mean, those are key pieces of information in addition to the swim lanes.
Yeah.
To understand the overall process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Got it. Good stuff, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on, and I think this topic is something that we all need to really reflect on, because we all have opportunities to improve, right? And so no matter how good you are, I mean, Toyota, these companies at the top, obviously look at Toyota. I mean, they haven't been stellar lately, right? And so no one's infallible here, right? So I think we all need to be looking at how do we improve, and getting back to the basics of map out your process. Even if you think it's working well, map it out and then figure out how can we make it a little bit better. Even just 5% better. If you're doing very well, customers are happy, fantastic. How can you make it a little bit better? Because then you could potentially win new customers that you don't even have today. So,
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, hey, man, how can people best connect with you, Matt?
So the best way to connect with me is either through email or through LinkedIn. Through email, it's matt@sparkengineers.com, and that's Spark with a C, SPARC. Or my LinkedIn, it's just Matthew Townsend within LinkedIn. And either way, they can get a hold of me. We can talk about processes. We can talk about automation. Spark Engineers is actually a certified systems integrator for a large collaborative robot company. But we always go into it with that mindset of, all right, let's improve the process first before we automate, and try to help out as many people as possible.
Yeah, man. Awesome. Well, again, thanks for coming on, and keep up the great work. And man, let's go fix some processes.
Heck yeah.
All right. Take care.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks for listening. Whether you've been on the continuous improvement journey for many years, or perhaps you're just getting started, Gemba Academy is here to support you. And while we're best known for our more than 1,500 Lean and Six Sigma teaching and virtual tour videos, we also have a team of experienced Lean and Six Sigma practitioners available for one-on-one coaching, as well as a variety of Lean and Six Sigma certification options. To learn more and to schedule a demo, head on over to gembaacademy.com.